This British-US war against Yemen is a war to protect Israel and its genocidal campaign in Gaza. The United States and Britain, some of the richest countries in the world, are bombing some of the poorest people in the world in Yemen for the crime of defending some of the most persecuted people in the world in Gaza. Britain could use diplomacy to solve these issues, but instead it sneaks and scuttles across the region working for Israel. Britain and the United States bombed 73 locations in Yemen last night. Are shipping containers more important than human lives? Joe Biden is now the 4th US president in a row to have bombed Yemen. Britain has had a role meddling, invading and airstriking Yemen since 1839. Today we are in a situation where the war on Yemen represents a continuation of the last decade of war in the country. It's believed 377,000 people were killed. 85,000 children are believed to have died of starvation across the last decade or so in Yemen, thanks to the British and US-backed war. During that period, British-trained pilots dropped British-made bombs from British-made planes with targeting help coming directly from British officers. You even had the use of British-made cluster bombs which were produced in the 80s but are now considered illegal. These were used by British-backed forces on the people of Yemen. The main company which benefited from that war in this country was BAE Systems, with around $20 billion worth of sales to Saudi Arabia. BAE Systems launched an advertising campaign at the time aimed at children, where aircraft technicians, the very aircraft technicians that would be operating on the planes sold to Saudi Arabia to bomb Yemen with, would be reading children's stories.
Once upon a time, a father and 2 children lived by a lake, next to a deep, dark forest.
We cannot forget that components for the F-35, which Israel is using in its genocidal war on Gaza, are produced in this very country. We look at Israel sniping women in a church in Gaza. The components for the sniper rifles were sold to them by the British, and the very sniper rifles themselves were sold by the British. We also are constantly being told that this is about protecting civilian life. Are all those ships that the Yemeni armed forces have intercepted civilian? The very first ship that the Yemeni armed forces seized in the Red Sea was a vessel known as the Central Park. The Central Park was owned by Zodiac Maritime. Now, Zodiac Maritime is a British registered company owned by the Offer family, the richest family in Israel. This company and this family were revealed by the Times newspaper over a decade ago to be ferrying elite units of Israeli intelligence across the region to carry out assassinations. Zodiac Maritime is an arm of Israeli intelligence. So when the Yemeni armed forces targeted them, they had reason to believe that those ships were being used for Israeli surveillance. But we also need to look closely at the military contractors tasked with protecting Zodiac Maritime ships. The company is none other than British security and intelligence firm Ambry, a security company which is staffed by former high-ranking employees of the British Ministry of Defence. For example, James Hopkinson, prior to working for Ambry, he was the assistant head of counter-terrorism at the UK Ministry of Defence. Another key figure at Ambry is none other than Harry Pearce, previously an operations manager with the British military. So here we have a British company staffed by former British military personnel protecting an Israeli-owned British shipping company which has been reported to act for Israeli intelligence in the Red Sea. This is certainly not the civilian target that Keir Starmer and others make it out to be. And besides, It's a very strange world when we look at shipping containers as civilian targets, but not hospitals, schools, churches and mosques in Gaza. Countries like Yemen, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, across our lifetime have functioned as cash cows for the military-industrial complex. The war on terror on average consisted of the US and its allies dropping 46 bombs per day. Do we think that more bombs on a country in the Middle East will bring anything but profits for the worst of humanity? A great man once said, they've got money for wars but can't feed the poor. At a time when temperatures in Britain are falling to -4 and people are sleeping on the streets, when doctors, nurses, railway workers, teachers are on strike because of their unjust working conditions, this government wants to use your money to bomb some of the poorest people in the world. We must aspire to be like former British soldier Ahmed al-Batati. In the midst of the war on Yemen, which was leading to a child dying every 10 minutes, Ahmed al-Batati stood outside Downing Street in his uniform and protested against the war on Yemen. Ahmed al-Batati was then arrested and detained and discharged from the British Army for his service to humanity. We must at this time rebel on the very same basis that our government is a direct participant in Israel's war on the region. If you find yourself bombing some of the poorest people in the world to defend a genocide against some of the most persecuted people in the world, you're not the good guys. We have a mainstream media which is servile to the interests of the oppressors. For that reason, we have to support alternatives which can break that dominance on the narrative. So I would ask that you support Double Down News now through Patreon and continue to allow Double Down News to present the view from below.